The moment Michael Harper stepped into the chandelier-lit ballroom with a woman on his arm who clearly did not belong there, the room seemed to inhale at once, as if the air itself had decided to pause and watch. He was a single father in a borrowed suit, shoulders slightly hunched from years of carrying responsibility alone, and beside him walked a stunning stranger in a deep blue dress, her calm confidence clashing with the unspoken judgment rippling through the crowd. No one knew why he had brought her. No one knew what he was about to lose or discover before the night was over. Before the story unfolds any further, take a second to pause. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that people are more than the labels placed on them, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The party was being held in San Francisco, inside a historic hotel overlooking the bay, where polished marble floors reflected the wealth and power of the people gathered there. Michael had avoided places like this since his wife passed away 4 years earlier, leaving him alone with their 6-year-old son Noah, and a silence that never quite left the house. Tonight, however, he had no choice. The event was hosted by a powerful investment firm, and attendance was quietly mandatory for anyone hoping to keep their job. Michael worked in data analysis, a role that paid the bills but never earned him a seat at the inner circle. Invitations had gone out with +1s encouraged, and when he realized everyone else would arrive with spouses or partners, panic had set in. Not because he needed approval, but because he was tired of pitying looks, tired of being the odd one out, tired of carrying grief like an invisible stain. That was how he found himself hiring Clare Thompson, an escort recommended discreetly by a colleague who assumed Michael's hesitation came from lack of confidence rather than a broken heart. Clare was nothing like the stereotype he'd imagined. She was thoughtful, observant, and listened more than she spoke. On the drive to the hotel, she noticed the way Michael kept glancing at his phone, checking the time to make sure his sister-in-law had picked up Noah. She noticed the nervous way his fingers tapped against his knee. She did not judge him. She simply offered calm presence, something Michael hadn't realized he missed so deeply. Inside the ballroom, conversations softened as they passed. Michael could feel the weight of eyes on his back, feel the unasked questions pressing in. Clare moved with grace, her posture straight, her expression serene, as if she had every right to be there. For the first time in years, Michael felt a strange sense of relief, as though someone else was sharing the burden of standing tall. He introduced himself to colleagues, nodded politely to executives who barely remembered his name, and tried not to think about how absurd the situation was. He told himself it was just one night, just a role he needed to play to survive in a world that had no patience for vulnerability. Then, Richard Wallace arrived. Richard Wallace was the billionaire whose name adorned hospital wings, university buildings, and charity galas like this one. He was the firm's largest investor. A man whose approval could change careers with a single sentence. When he entered the room, attention shifted toward him like iron filings toward a magnet. Michael had never spoken to him before, never expected to. But as the night wore on, Richard's gaze lingered on Michael and Clare, not with curiosity, but recognition. It unsettled Michael in a way he couldn't explain. As servers circulated with champagne and laughter swelled in practiced waves, Richard approached. He was tall, silver-haired, his presence quiet but commanding. He greeted Michael warmly, surprising him by knowing his name, and then turned to Clare with an intensity that made the room feel smaller. He leaned in slightly, close enough that only she could hear him, and whispered one question that changed everything. Clare's face shifted, not with fear, but with something like resolve. Her eyes softened, and she glanced at Michael, who noticed the change but couldn't interpret it. The billionaire straightened, his expression unreadable, then nodded slowly, as if confirming something he had long suspected. Without another word, he excused himself, leaving behind a tension that refused to dissipate. Michael felt his chest tighten. He asked Clare if everything was okay, but she only smiled gently and told him it was. Yet something had cracked open in that moment, and Michael sensed the night was no longer under his control. The room buzzed with speculation, whispers darting between guests like sparks. People watched Richard as he moved toward the stage, where the evening's announcements were about to begin. When Richard took the microphone, the room fell silent. He spoke about philanthropy, about opportunity, about the responsibility of those who had more to protect those who had less. Then, unexpectedly, he told a story about a young woman he had once known, someone who had grown up navigating impossible choices, someone whose life had been defined by survival rather than privilege. He spoke of judgment, of how easy it was to reduce people to a single chapter of their lives and miss the whole story. As he spoke, his eyes returned to Claire, then to Michael. Richard announced a new initiative, a foundation dedicated to helping single parents and caregivers access childcare, education, and financial stability. He spoke about unseen heroes, about people who showed up every day despite grief, exhaustion, and loneliness. He invited Michael to stand, praising his work ethic, his quiet dedication, and his refusal to let hardship turn him bitter. Michael stood on shaking legs, heat rushing to his face, unable to understand why this was happening. Later, away from the crowd, Claire finally explained. Years earlier, before she ever became an escort, she had been a scholarship student supported by a grant from Richard Wallace's late wife, a woman who believed deeply in second chances. After a series of tragedies and debts, Claire's life had veered off course. Richard recognized her not for what she was doing now, but for who she had always been. The question he whispered was not one of accusation, but remembrance. Michael felt something inside him loosen, a knot he hadn't known how to untie. He realized he had spent years hiding his pain, afraid that showing it would diminish him. Yet here was a room full of powerful people, moved not by perfection, but by honesty. Claire hadn't saved him by pretending to be something else. She had simply stood beside him without shame. As the night ended and the city lights shimmered outside, Michael thanked Claire not for playing a role, but for reminding him that dignity wasn't something granted by others. It was something claimed. He went home to Noah that night with a lighter step, carrying not just hope for his career, but a renewed belief in himself. If this story is touching your heart right now, if you've ever felt judged, overlooked, or misunderstood, please take a moment to like this video, share it, and let us know in the comments. Your engagement tells us these stories matter. And before the final moments fade, leave a comment sharing whether you believe people should be defined by their past or by their courage to keep going. Michael's life did not transform overnight, but something fundamental shifted. He stopped apologizing for his story. He showed up as a father, a professional, and a man who had survived loss without losing compassion. And somewhere between grief and grace, he learned that sometimes the most powerful question whispered in a crowded room is the one that reminds you who you really are.